Today is going to be introduced by the Honorable Buzz McDaniel. Buzz? Or the Honorable.
Well, we're just elated to have Aliye Shimi. Aliye has been here many times, and just a very brief introduction. Aliye joined the Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry in 2014 as an associate director. In 2018, she was promoted to the executive director, and she was informing me, I guess with a little structural reorganization, she is now the CEO of Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry. That happened just a couple of weeks ago. So Aliye brings an extraordinary amount of ability and an amazing amount of energy. TMM is so fortunate to have her, and the city of Tulsa is so fortunate to have her as a part of our community. Please welcome her.
Would you like to? You all join me in the spirit of prayer. Great One, we thank you this morning for all of these friendly faces, for our safety, for our well-being. So grateful for all the work that everybody in this room does and everybody in our city. At a time with so much chaos and so much suffering around the world, we ask that you console us. We ask that you comfort us. We ask that you bring us peace. We ask all of this in your name. Amen. Thank you so very much for having me. It's always a treat to be here at Harvard Avenue. I consider Harvard Avenue like a second home to me. I've been coming here, Buzz, probably 2011, 2012, around that time. So, yeah, it's been a minute. Yes, it's been a minute. Courtney Richards, the Reverend Courtney Richards, was one of our board members, and we would work pretty closely with Mark as well at that time. And now we are honored to have Whitney Waller as one of our board members. So delighted for our Harvard Avenue family and the work that we do together. I don't know if you all know about Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry, the history of TMM. We are going on almost 89 years this year in Tulsa with all the great work that TMM has done. And I know Buzz has been at the helm of that for quite some time. So they started programs like the Tulsa Day Center for the homeless, Life Senior Services, Youth Services of Tulsa, Meals on Wheels, the Tulsa Mental Health Association. Multiples of these programs were all started by the multi-faith community of Tulsa. And when they were strong enough to be led off to be standalones, that's what TMM has done. So anytime there is a concern in the community, TMM and its community members have stepped up to try and solve that problem and rectify it and have our city thrive. And so I know it's done some amazing work. And then there for a little bit, it was a little stagnant, and we've picked up the pace again. So we've been working on multiple new projects, and I've been in here presenting on some of those to you. I know that Mr. McDaniel asked me to give you some of the updates on some of the projects that we've been doing. So I'll begin with our newest project that we're doing in North Tulsa. About 2 years ago, we started working with then Councilwoman Krista Patrick for District 3. We're told that District 3, quite a large part of District 3 is a food desert. And so the area specifically that we were working in is Dawson, which is right off of Pine and Yale, between Pine and Sheridan and Pine and Yale. The Met Junior and Senior High is there, and Hamilton Elementary is also located right there in that area. So we started trying to figure out how we can solve this issue of this food desert that's there. And the only good nutritional source of food that they have is a Dollar General just right at the corner, and they just opened a Dollar Tree on the other end. So one on Sheridan and one on Yale. Yeah, exactly. We're not very nutritional, and there's one taco truck right at the tire alignment place. That's it. That's what they have. So if you can think of all of these community members, so when you're thinking of people, those who don't have access to transportation, because as you know, we don't do such a great job of public transportation in our city either. So when you're talking about people who have to walk to be able to get their food, or if we're talking about children who are in need of food, it was a pretty big challenge. So we started working with Councilwoman Krista Patrick, who I'm happy to announce after she stepped down from council in December, we've hired her as our associate director, and now she is our executive director. So she's working directly for Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry currently. And we decided to open a grocery store. Our grocery store is a micro grocery store that I presented on last time I was here. It's called The Bazaar. And the whole purpose of this grocery store is trying to bring our Oklahoma producers, so our farmers, all of our producers from Oklahoma, to be able to cut out the middleman for them to bring directly to market so they can bring that price point down so we can have good, nutritional, wholesome food in our grocery store while trying to provide good food for community members that is not junk, right? At first, community members said, well, you're going to close within 3 months. You're going to have theft. You're going to have this. You're going to have that. And so we started, the wheels started turning, trying to figure out what we can do to mitigate those issues. So we decided, why not put everything in a vending machine, right? In large vending machines some are refrigerated, some are frozen, some are, room temperature vending machines. And we decided, why don't we have a membership, right? Just like Sam's or Costco, you have a membership card to be able to gain entry into the store. So anybody in that community within a 1 square radius gets a free membership. Anybody outside of that area pays $25 for a year for a membership. They get a membership card. They'll scan their card. The doors will open. They'll have access to the store. All along the walls will be all the vending machines. And in the center, we'll have all the bulk grains. So your coffee beans, your pastas, all of those will be dispensed out of dispensaries. And they'll be able to purchase them that way. This way, we're also able to track statistics. We have very little statistics when it comes to food insecurities. And so the city was thrilled to know that we can track children's statistics, adult statistics, all the biographic, all the demographic information that will be in there. We also wanted to figure out how we can help the children that go to school right there, both at the Met and at Hamilton. We know in some areas where addiction is a large issue, we know that sometimes parents, unfortunately, because of the addiction, barter away the WIC benefits for the children. So the children go without food. We know that most of the time, the only meal they get is when they're in school. And when it's in the evening, when it's the weekend, when it's summertime, they go without. So we tried to figure out how we can mitigate that issue. So we figured we'll be able to give every child at least 1 free meal a day. So this way, every child gets their own membership card. They can just walk up to the store. They don't have to pass any main streets. It's just right through the neighborhood. We're just 1 block in front of them. They'll just walk right on through. They'll scan their card, and they'll be able to access the store. Now, if we took it a step further, and we wanted to make sure that we help other entrepreneurs in the community as well. So all along the fence line, we're going to have a food truck court. Food trucks will be getting free rent. They get free electricity, free water, and free internet. And in lieu of those services that we're giving them for free, they're going to be giving X amount of meals a day for free to the children that come up. So this way they get hot meals served to them immediately. So they'll come into the store, they'll scan their membership card, they'll get a little token. They'll be able to give those tokens to any one of those food trucks, and they'll be able to receive a free meal. So this way we'll make sure that our children are getting fed, regardless of what the situation is. So we were able to do that. And this way, our entrepreneurs, our food truck owners will be also able to thrive. This gives them a benefit to be able to make money because anybody can pull in and purchase food from them at any point in time. We're not limiting them and we're not asking for money from them or anything. We're giving them the services for free, about $800 to $900 of services a month for free. So in lieu of that money, they'll be giving the free meals. We are trying to be eco-friendly as well. So the entire project will be running on solar. So we've got that going in on the grocery store as well. And we also know that most of our community members in that area have difficulty with clean water and with ice. And so we're putting a ready ice container there so they'll be able to access clean ice and clean water. So that's all that's going on in that little area. Yes, it is a lot. Initially, we only wanted to purchase about 2 to 3 acres to be able to put this grocery store down. Ultimately, we ended up purchasing all 29 acres. So we have from Pine to the railroad tracks, and we have from Yale to the railroad company. So that's what all we own. And so we started imagining what else can we do in that area. We had sold TMM's building back in 2020. Our offices were sold back in 2020, and I just worked remotely from my home and my secretary's home. And so we had 2 existing buildings that are on that property. So one of those buildings, we turned it into our headquarters, so our offices will be there. But the back room that we have, we turned it into a commercial entrepreneurial kitchen. And the goal with that is multifaceted. Chefs who we've been having conversations with both here locally and abroad will be coming in on the weekends and will be giving lessons to both the children and their parents on how to take some of this food and how to prepare it simply in their homes, right? So this way, some of them don't know what kale is. Some of them don't know what certain, fruits and vegetables and things are. So the chefs are going to come in and volunteer their time, and they're going to teach community members how to prepare good nutritional food. So we'll be providing classes for the community members there. Also, there's multiple entrepreneurs in Tulsa who work out of their homes, and they have to rent or purchase licenses from other restaurants to be able to do catering. So this way, they're able to rent out our space for a nominal fee. We have storage area as well in our HQ. So we'll have cold storage and we'll have dry storage. And we have an additional office that they can office themselves. It's a flex office. So they can keep all their documents there. They can use the address there. This way, entrepreneurs can come in. They can use our kitchen, and they can, do any of their catering orders or whatever it is that they need to do. And this way, they'll be able to help out themselves. So this is a way for us to give back to the small business owners that are there. The building next to it is a dilapidated building currently, but we're getting ready to work on that next. If you remember, Buzz, back in the day, we used to have the Tulsa Metro Mechanic Program. And so the Metro Mechanic Program back in the 80s and 90s was partnerships with local mechanics who, when people came into Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry that couldn't afford to have their cars fixed, their vehicles repaired. And we know that if your vehicle is broken down, you can't get to work. If you can't get to work, you can't make ends meet. If you can't make ends meet, you're going to be homeless, right? And so to mitigate this situation, we decided to turn the other building into the Tulsa Metro Mechanic Building. We have a team of 8. We have 4 mechanics and 4 body guys who are coming into our space. They're going to pay us rent, and they're going to be able to do their own work. So they have their own clientele that they'll be working on. And then when we have clientele that comes in through Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry, they'll be able to do any of the basic repairs that need to be done. If they need to do something a little bit more, we'll be able to work out that deal. But they'll be able to do that. And so the third piece to that is that the Met High School, it's an entrepreneurial school. It's not one of these academic, it's not like Booker T, right? And so kids are looking for an entrepreneurship program. The problem is most of them can't pass the test to get into Tulsa Tech or to OTC. So we're lowering that threshold. We're lowering that barrier. And so a couple of students per semester will be able to come through our entrepreneurship program at the mechanic shop, and they'll be under the tutelage of between the mechanics and the body guys. We've partnered with the city of Tulsa because they have a mechanics program at the city of Tulsa. So they have certified mechanics that will come and teach the kids in our space. We had spoken to many other mechanics in the past, but they did not want to take the responsibility because of that insurance, that liability. They said, we love the program and we'd love to help, but we can't have the liability of having kids in our space just in case if something happens to them, who's going to cover that? So we spoke to TPS, and Dr. Johnson reassured us that TPS will be taking on that liability. So TPS has that insurance that will cover the children. God forbid if anything happens. We hope that doesn't happen. But TPS and TMM have a partnership now that way they take on the liability, and we have the space and the educators to be able to educate the kids. So this way we have this entrepreneurship program going on between the Met and in TMM. The mayor has asked us how we can expand that program and how we can replicate some of these projects that we're doing in other parts of the city. So we're working on that. Just west of our headquarters building, we have quite a bit of open land. And again, at the Met in Hamilton, they used to have a gardening program, a community gardening program. When they got a new principal last year, that program was done away with. So the counselors and the teachers asked us what we can do if they can come under the TMM umbrella to be able to do that. So we've provided space for the kids to come in and do community gardens. I had a conversation with one of the general managers of Lowe's at 71st and 169, and they are donating all of the flower beds, all of the dirt, all of the equipment necessary for the kids. And so next week, the group of kids with the counselors will be going in to make that ask so they can get the win. They're not going to know that I already made the ask, but they're going to go ahead and make that ask and get that win from the manager of Lowe's. And so we'll be implementing that here within the next few weeks as well. Every year when they do the census, they rezone, they redistrict areas in Tulsa. When they did that, District 3 lost its only coffee shop. She Brews used to be in District 3. Now it's no longer in District 3. So as large as District 3 is, there's no longer a coffee shop there. So, all these community meetings we were having, the number one thing we heard besides the food insecurities issue was we don't have a coffee shop. And we're 2 minutes away from the airport where we're located, literally 2 minutes away from the airport. We kept hearing this over and over again from the airport staff. We kept hearing this over and over again from Prior Machine Shop, all these other industries that are out there. There's not a coffee shop out there. So we said, okay, we'll figure out how to get a coffee shop there. So we figured out how to get a coffee shop. So right on the corner of Pine and Yale, we're putting a coffee shop as well. And so it'll be something comparable to a Panera. So they'll have sandwiches and light breakfast bites and things like that, but they'll have coffee and tea and smoothies and so on and so forth. We want to make sure that we're not stepping on any other toes of businesses. There's a donut shop, Brown's Donut Shop, has been there for decades. And so we don't want to take that away from that family. And so we just want to help bolster whatever other support that we can do there. And then, of course, the next biggest issue, which is number one on the mayor's agenda, is housing. When we first purchased that area, that land, there was probably about 100 to 150 unhoused individuals that were living on our property. And so before we started, there's a lot of tree and wooded area on our property. And it's right, if you go just further north, Highway 11 is right there. If you go south, 244 is right there. And so it was a pretty large encampment that we had. We had 3 separate encampments on our property. We worked pretty diligently for about 3 months with the Tulsa Day Center for the Homeless. Myself and the councilwoman and several others, we went into the encampments. We had conversations with them. We were telling them that, we have construction getting ready to start and we have to fence off the property. We want to make sure everybody's safe. So the majority of them we were able to put in rapid rehousing. The Tulsa Day Center brought in big box trucks to get all of their belongings on these box trucks, and we were able to safely get everybody out of that area and most of them into some sort of stable housing. So we were able to do that. So we know that housing is a huge crisis in Tulsa. And so we're able to do some housing on our property as well. So are you all familiar with 11th and Lewis, Mother Road Market, just right across the street? They just opened some new buildings, right? So the first floor is commercial space. Floors 2, 3, and 4 are all housing, kind of that industrial look. So some people had asked, can you put some tiny homes in? And the community members were like, no, we don't want any tiny homes. And it's not going to look right in that area. It's a very industrial area in Dawson. And so we said, well, how about we do what they have over at 11th and Lewis? That's that brick, that industrial looking building where we have commercial space below. So we bring in more entrepreneurs and we have all that housing going upwards. And so we can go up to 4 stories. And so we can house somewhere between 100 to 150 units in 2 separate areas of our land. And so I was just telling Mr. McDaniel the week before last, I had a meeting with with the mayor of Tulsa. And he said, can we fast forward this project, please? And so now we're in fast forward phase of the housing. And so it will be mixed use housing. So we'll be able to take in housing vouchers. We'll be able to, regular renters will be able to be in there. And also, I'm sure you all know some of the other work we do with domestic violence and with human trafficking. And we get calls all the time where we need to hide, a victim here or there. So we'll be able to secure a few of those apartments to where we can hide our victims in there until they need to be moved on or what needs to happen. So this gives us plenty of leeway to be able to move and do what we need to do. Last week, I received a call from from Joplin, Missouri. And they had a client that needed to be relocated, a human trafficking victim that needed to be relocated. And so we were able to get her to Oklahoma and into transitional here. But we get those calls quite frequently. And most of the time we don't have space to be able to do that. And so by the good grace of God, we were able to get her in because the Ridge just opened up their transitional facility. So that's how our housing will be. So we'll have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments that will be in that housing, in those apartments. And it'll be secure housing. So they'll get a little key fob. They'll only be able to access the floor that they're going up to. And so we'll make sure that it's secure. But keep your ears open and your eyes open. You'll hear about that here pretty soon from the city as well. So on that 29 acres, that's all we're doing over there. Just a little bit of work over there, Fun times. I know I've presented to you multiple times about our facility in Bixby. And I'm sure some of you all saw it in the end of March and beginning of April. We had a Bixby community meeting trying to rezone. We have about 160 acres in Bixby off of 171st and Sheridan. And so we've had a little bit of pushback from some of the community members, the NIMBYs, not in my backyard type folks. And this is for our juvenile facility for our kids 12 to 17 that are victims of human trafficking. And so tomorrow I have a meeting with the mayor and the deputy mayor of the Bixby community so we can see if we can just hurry up and finish this rezoning business so we can start that facility. So our first building will have 16 beds. That's what DHS has certified us for, is each unit has to be 16. So 16 individual rooms will be for the clients, and we'll be the only facility in the state of Oklahoma that takes in boys, girls, all youth across the board. We only have one other facility here in Oklahoma, and it's called the Demand Project. And they only take in girls, and only girls of a certain religious background. And they have 32 beds, but they only have capacity. They only have enough staff for 5 to be able to have 5 beds. And of those 5, DHS has only put a contingency licensing for them or a contract for 1 bed. And so DHS is constantly having to take these kids out of Oklahoma and put them in different states wherever they can find housing for them. So this way we'll be able to rectify it. I don't know if you all know what the state of human trafficking looks like, especially with regards to juveniles here in Tulsa. When I say human trafficking, a lot of people think of the movie Taken, right? Most people can't fathom that their own family members are doing this to the children. So when we look at the stats here in Oklahoma, and when we see the kids that are coming through our programs that are either being adjudicated or the ones that are coming through the Family Safety Center, about 76% of the kids that are coming through that are victims of human trafficking are being trafficked by their own family members. So it's called familial trafficking. Of that 76%, now this is an even harder statistic for you all to swallow because I still can't swallow it, and I've been doing this work for about 8 years. 60% of that 76% is done by their biological mother. Their biological mother, unfortunately, because of substance abuse, because of other unfortunate issues that they're dealing with, their mothers are the ones that are trafficking these children, whether it's for their rent, whether it's for their electricity, whether it's for whatever the case may be. 60% of that is their own biological mother. We've had multiple cases just recently. I know it's pretty hush-hush. You guys don't see so much juvenile trafficking. When they have busts with human trafficking rings that deal with adults, you'll hear it on the news. You've heard it in Muskogee. You've heard it in Coweta here recently over the past couple of months. But when it comes to juveniles, they don't report on that as much because of our juvenile victims. And so, unfortunately, it's uncles, it's grandfathers, it's, brothers, all these horrible things. I wish I could say that was not the case, but unfortunately, that's the case. So when you look at human trafficking here in Oklahoma, it's Tulsans, kids who are from Tulsa who are being, most of the time, they don't even leave that couple of square miles. They're being trafficked right in that few square miles right here. It's not some Eastern European mafia that's swooping in and kidnapping our kids and auctioning them off. That's, unfortunately, that's just what you see in the movies. That's just not what's happening here. And so for us to be able to provide our kids a safe space, we're just trying to work as diligently as possible to be able to help provide them services. And so I was sharing with Mr. McDaniel when we went to the community member in March, and I'm sure you guys saw it on the news, the first lady that stood up. But I didn't even get to say 2 words before she stood up. She said, listen, the work you're doing is all well and great. We're all compassionate, but we don't want illegals in our backyard. That was her word. And I said, most of these kids are right here. They're Tulsans. They're not illegals. And she said, well, we don't want them being brought in by these gangs, and we don't want any of these illegal people in our backyards. And I said, again, most of these children are all victims. Let me underline that. And they are children right in our backyard. So another gentleman stood up and said, well, 12-year-olds aren't children. And I said, clearly you don't have children because 12-year-olds are children, and until they hit 18, they can't vote, they can't drink till they're 21. So I don't know what to tell you, but 12-year-olds are definitely children. They might be adolescents, but they're still children. And so, that's our range is 12 to 17. We've already have an MOU put in place with the Ridge. So as they graduate our program, they will, if they can be rehoused back with safe family members, they will be rehoused back with safe family members. If they can be put into therapeutic foster homes, they will be placed in therapeutic foster homes. If not, they will go on to the Ridge in their transitional facility. So that's the plan for the kids out in Bixby. Yes, sir. Yes, the Ridge. So are you all familiar with what used to be the Day Spring Villa? It's a facility that was ran by the Baptist community for a very long time, and it was for domestic violence. It's a shelter for domestic violence. And now they're called the Spring. And Leslie Klingfield, who's a dear friend, she's their CEO. They just purchased about 3.5 acres, and it was like a little summer camp. It looked like a little retreat way out in Bixby in this cute little wooded area. It's actually close to the Bixby High School. And so they have little cabins that they can put 2 to 3 beds in. And so that is their transitional facility. So folks who come out of the Spring, their shelter, are able to transition into the Ridge. And they just had the grand opening just a few weeks ago of the Ridge. And I believe they have 18 cabins. So they can take up, 18 times 3, 4, however many beds they can have, they can take into their transitional facility. And we work hand in hand with the Ridge, and we serve together on OCAT, the Oklahoma Coalition Against Human Trafficking. So that's what the Ridge is. And so yet another amazing program. And so they take in domestic violence victims. They also take in victims of human trafficking. But they are strictly for adults. We have multiple facilities in Oklahoma that are for adults, but unfortunately we don't have anything for juveniles. So we will be the only one in the state that takes in all of our youth. So that's just a little bit of the work that we've been doing when I haven't been twiddling my thumbs. So I think I've spoken plenty, and I want to open it up to questions because I'm sure you all have many questions. I'd like to answer those. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So therapeutic foster homes for individuals, couples, or for individuals who wish to go through training through the foster facility, through the foster system. They're put through, I believe it's a 28-week program to help them deal with children who have specific types of trauma. They're able to recognize it. They're able to figure out how to deal with that trauma. They have more support that comes in. And so specific to human trafficking, children have, if you can imagine the horrific issues that they've dealt with, all the trauma that they dealt with, they teach the parents or the adults who are going to be taking the children in how to deal with that. So they're more well-equipped and prepared. So they have more success. And so that's what a therapeutic foster home is. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Yes? The question that Mr. Boswell asked was, he said, Aliye, you've been involved with the Afghan resettlement here in Oklahoma since day one, since the first one stepped foot here in August of 2021. He said, could you please bring us up to date? So so let me step back. In August, when we got word back in 2021 that the State Department was going to be resettling Afghan friends here, very quickly, we started gearing up, and being that I'm of the Muslim community, I started doing all the trainings for Catholic Charities, for B'nai Muna, for the city, for law enforcement, for everybody. So we did cultural competency training for them. After that, we started working pretty closely on how to get them, housed here. If you all remember that same year, that November, we hosted a large Tulsa Police Department dinner here, right here in your gym. And we had so many of our Afghan family members that were here as well. And they were so grateful to be here at Harvard Avenue. We had an amazing Thanksgiving dinner for them here that TMM hosted. Initially, we had about 1,000 that came in on the first wave to Tulsa. And then shortly after, we had an additional 500 more that came in. Very quickly, those numbers started rising. When we looked at the map in the United States, Texas was taken in the largest number, a little over 5,000. California was taken in a little over 3,000. And we were set to take in about 2,000 in Oklahoma. But when you look at our population compared to California and Texas, per capita, we took the number one amount of Afghans that came in. And because our governor and our leaders were very, very gracious, the amount of services that they received when they came in was unmatched in any other state here. And they received such a warm welcome in Oklahoma, and specifically in Tulsa. that President Biden sent a crew here. We had an administration of 7 that came out and visited for 2 days to see what we were doing right in Tulsa so they can implement it in the rest of the states. And so currently we have probably somewhere between 3,700 to 3,800 Afghans that are housed here in Tulsa. Now, because of the way they came, they were brought out so quickly. Yes, the vetting process wasn't 100%. Yes, they were brought in as parolees. And the vetting continued when they got here. So there was a lot of vetting, and I was involved in that process intimately with law enforcement. I also liaised with the Joint Terrorism Task Force and law enforcement here. So I can tell you that I was intimately involved with a lot of that vetting process. For the most part, the majority of them have been absolutely amazing. Just like in any community, you're going to have a few bad apples, right? And when we figured out who those few bad apples were, they were rectified very quickly. But other than that, our Afghan community has been absolutely delightful to us. For 20 plus years, we had been in their country, and they helped our service members tremendously. There is no way that we could have brought back all of our service members if it wasn't for their help. And so, this is a way for us to thank them. We have so many of them here who are who have been integrated in our community. And so you can imagine the fear that they're having right now as our Attorney General wants all of them removed. And they were brought in legally by our government. So it's not that they were brought in illegal. They were brought in legally, right? And so there's a lot of fear. I don't know how many families are signed up because we helped all of the houses of worship in Northeast Oklahoma. We connected them with as many families as we could with each house of worship. I believe there's 5 connected to yours. Is that correct, Mr. McDaniel? 5 families that I believe Harvard Avenue has continued to help along this time. And so, I mean, we've heard nothing but great things, both from our Afghan community members and from our faith communities here, right? We haven't had any issues. And so we were very grateful for that. And I know a lot of people are kind of shocked or they don't have all of the information. So they're trying to understand how to wrap their brain around this whiplash that we're getting from our government right now, unfortunately. And so, I just, Mr. McDaniel asked me to give you a little bit of an update as to what's going on with that community, but that's where we're looking at. Oklahoma City has about 2,500 or so Afghan individuals as well, in Oklahoma City. So we have quite a number of them here. Several of them who came here, they thought they wanted to go to Dallas or to LA or to New York. And within 2-3 weeks, they jumped right back on the plane and they came right back. They were like, no, we like it better in Oklahoma. It's like, I told you the grass is not always greener over there. So yeah, very quickly they came back. And so, yes, sir. Yes, absolutely. So Mr. McDaniel's question was, do any of these folks have a process for citizenship? So I don't know how familiar you all are with the refugee process. Okay. So I'm going to back up and I'm going to tell you what the process looks like for most refugees, and then I'll tell you what it looked like for them. So anytime there's displacement in any country, people leave their land, they leave their country, and they'll walk, drive, take boats, however they can get to another country. The second they get to another country where they can make safe entry, they go and they apply at a UNHCR. Through the UN, the resettlement program, they'll be signed in there, okay? They'll register with the UN. And then if they're placed in a refugee camp or if they're placed in housing, however that looks like, it depends. It could be a year. It could be 15 years. We know some refugees who stayed 10, 15 years in refugee camps before they were placed in different countries. Now, if they have family members in the United States, first-degree family members in the United States, and they make that choice and they ask, can I be resettled in the United States with our family? Then after all of our alphabet soup agencies do all of their background checks, and once they're cleared and they've attended multiple appointments now at their refugee site, at their refugee camp, and once the government deems them safe to come to the United States, they then come to the United States. But before they come here, one of the 12 national resettlement agencies has to accept their case. So Catholic Charities is one of the largest. And then highest, which is through the Jewish community, is the second largest that they have here. The Baptists have theirs, the Presbyterians have one, and so on and so forth. Majority of them are through faith communities. They are on the national level. And then through the national level, they're able to go down to the state level. Each state has different ones. Not every state has a highest community. Like we just got ours through B'nai Yamuna in 2021. Before that, Catholic Charities was the only agency to do resettlement for about 50 years in Oklahoma. They were the only agency, and that was it. And they've done an amazing job with everything that they do. So from the national level, they'll send it out and they'll say, hey, we heard there's somebody in Oklahoma. They have family members in Oklahoma. Can you please check and see what we need to do? Can you handle if we send you a family of 4? And if the agency here says, yes, we can handle it, we've checked, we've verified, their family is here, great, we'll help them. Then they say, okay, they put them on the plane, they bring them to Tulsa, and then once they get to Tulsa, we have a welcoming committee that goes and welcomes them. But before they step foot in Tulsa, we make sure that housing is secure for them, regardless if it's, a rented apartment or a rented house or whatever that housing looks like. We make sure that housing is secure for them. We make sure that the furnishings are there. We make sure that all of their documents have already arrived so we can start working on their social security cards, so we can start figuring out what we need to do to take them to get immunizations, vaccinations, try to figure out how to get kids in school, enrolled in school, all of those things. And we also start working on jobs. So the vast majority of refugees who come into the United States have 90 days with an agency. For 90 days, they'll pay for their rent, their electric, they'll cover all of that. And they have 90 days to sink or swim, literally. So within 90 days, they have to start learning the language if they already don't know it. They have to find a job with help from YWCA and from the resettlement agency. They have to get their kids enrolled in school, and they have 90 days of help. After that 90 days, then they're on their own. If they're connected to a faith community like yours, then some of those faith communities step in and help. But if they're not, they're on their own. So my parents are immigrants. My parents immigrated from, they're Turkish. They lived in Germany. And then in 1975, they came here. They did not come through a resettlement. They came here on their own. 9 of my family members came here back in 1975. And I was the very first one of my family to be born here in 77, right here in Tulsa. So I'm an Okie through and through. I claim it. It's wonderful. But they came here because one of my uncles was here. And he came here in 1964. He married a young lady who was of German descent, and her family lived in Tulsa, and he brought them here. But, it's different. It looks different for everybody else. So within that refugee resettlement, normally they get 90 days of help, and that's it. And then the YWCA picks up after that 90 days. So at 91 days to 5 years, the YWCA picks up. They continue to teach them how to speak the language. They continue to do cultural competency classes for them. They continue to help them with employment. They get them connected with employers and so on and so forth. So they help them with those things. And in that process, so to your question, they are now becoming permanent residents, which means they're getting a green card. When they get here, they have an alien card. And then just as soon as they go through their appointments with USINS, with the Naturalization and Immigration Services, then they get a green card. So they're permanent residents. These people who are here are permanent residents. The Afghans were brought in through a parolee program, which had never happened before. Because of how quick they needed to get them out of the country, they had to go through that parolee program. But just as soon as they got here, within a couple of months, very quickly, they were all filed and had started the process of becoming permanent residents. So they all have green cards. They're all green card holders. And within 5 years after that resettlement process, they can get their U.S. citizenship. If they still hold down a job, if they're productive members in the society, if everything is great, then they can apply and get their U.S. citizenship. So our folks that are coming, that came in 2021, in September of 2026, a good majority of them will become U.S. citizens. So I hope that answers your question. I know it's a long, drawn-out answer, but it's kind of, it's kind of hectic the way that they get here. Yes, sir. So depending on what the situation is, yes. But even that is not holding our Attorney General back currently. Regardless of their immigration status, from what we're understanding is that they want them out of here. And so there's a lot of fear in the Afghan community, as is in our undocumented community. Even our folks who are documented, if they're not white and if they're not from Oklahoma, there's a lot of fear for people who look different and who seem different. Even U.S. citizens have been detained across the nation, as we've seen. And so there's a great amount of fear in our immigrant community currently. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A great many of them are. And so they've helped us both abroad and here, and they continue to do the work here. Many of them were hired by all of these agencies that are doing the resettlement. And so this way, they're able to help the new stream of folks coming in. As you know, those doors have been shut down. The only refugees that are able to come in through currently with this administration are SIVs. And those are special visas. Those are folks who were intimately working directly with the military, whether they were soldiers, high-ranking soldiers, or they were high-ranking intel officers. Those are pretty much the only ones that they're letting through currently as far as refugees coming into the country. So they've pretty much shut down the refugee program unless if they're SIV. And I'm trying to be mindful of our time. It's 10:30. Okay. I just want to be mindful of our time.
This mic works.
Yes.
I want to know, I think maybe you said the YWCA helps, but how do you find a job? I mean, what I'm saying is
Sure.
so many people are looking for jobs, and
Sure.
to give them a job that's meaningful and not just
Absolutely.
working at McDonald's.
Absolutely. So we are so grateful that in Tulsa, when the word came out, and this is really the first time that our community, we were so proud of Tulsans, everybody, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their religious affiliation, everybody stepped up. And so, business owners, factory owners, everybody came and said, how can we help? We can use 10 machinists, right? We can use tailors. We can use this. We can use that. And they came and they let us know what they can do, right? And then as these folks were coming in, even before they were coming in, when we get their bios, when we get all of that information, it tells us they're a doctor, they're a lawyer, they're a, whatever it is. They were a truck driver, they're whatever. And so we try to find something that matches, right? Of course, with the exception of being a doctor or a lawyer, that's a lot more difficult to be able to do here. I will say there was a young lady, she came in with her family. She was an attorney in Kabul, and she's one of the high-ranking case managers here at the YWCA, and she's going through the law program at TU currently. So she has a year left. So she will also be an attorney here in Tulsa now with her Juris Doctorate's degree from the University of Tulsa. So we're so proud of her. But, we're able to match them up, and these business owners then employ them. We at TMM did so much of the transportation piece of it as well. We transported them to every single one of their immigration appointments. We were transporting them to their jobs. We were transporting kids to school. So we made those connections as well because of the great connections we have with the houses of worship here. Everybody, I can't tell you. I was sitting with Mr. Boswell at lunch on a Saturday afternoon. I don't know how many times my phone went off, Mr. Boswell. It was very embarrassing, but I don't know, maybe 10, 15 times. And 20 times. And between community members who wanted to help and folks who were here who needed help, I was like, I'm so sorry, Mr. Boswell, just a second. Just 1 second, and so we did quite a bit of that to try and match them up. And many of them are thriving in these positions that they're in. So great question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Whatever you can get away with. So I'll tell it to you that way. Most of these people just came with the clothes on their backs, especially our Afghan folks, right? They didn't have time to pack, right? And so those that were able to take whatever they could, if they had anything to take with them, they did. And so I did help a few families who had a little bit of savings. Those were the more well-to-do families from Afghanistan and who did have a little bit of money. So we were able to help find them vehicles, and we were able to help match finances with them to be able to get them vehicles and things like that. But it's a very rare occasion that usually happens, especially if they're political asylees. Very rare. Yes, ma'am. We have such a bolstering staff. It was just Rita, who is my administrative assistant, and myself. And then in January, we hired on retired councilwoman Krista Patrick. So she's doing amazing. We also have a multi-faith chaplain that's embedded at the Family Safety Center. So she's on our staff as well as full-time as our contractor. And we're getting ready to hire the general manager for the grocery store. So that's what, 4 of us. So that's what we're doing. So I have sleep time, just a little bit in between all the work that we do. But yeah, I'm grateful for all the volunteers, because there's no way I wouldn't be able to do it without our volunteers. Yes, ma'am. So our organization back in the day was financed strictly by houses of worship. So there was a yearly membership fee that houses of worship used to pay to TMM. Of course, as COVID came through, that almost come to a complete halt. And so after COVID, it was private donors, individuals who these projects were very near and dear for them. So individuals started donating amounts. And then we have some federal funding that comes in. So like the grocery store that we're building, we were able to get $500,000 of city funds, of district funds specific to District 3. And so the city is paying for the brick and mortar, a portion of the brick and mortar of the grocery store. We were able to get $255,000 from ARPA to be able to purchase the vending machines and to be able to help some of the brick and mortar for the grocery store. So we have, our chaplain that's embedded at the Family Safety Center. We have philanthropic grants from the Zero Foundation that pays for some of those things. So we are working constantly at trying to find funding, whether it's private, whether it's federal, whether it's philanthropic, and that's how we're funded. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry? So the housing piece, when I was speaking to Mr. McDaniel, when I spoke with Mayor Nichols, he said, okay, we got to get you with the housing, with our funding folks. So it looks like that the city will probably fund half of that. And then we have a couple of philanthropic donors who will be paying for the other half of it. So that's what it looks like, is how we're going to be able to do that. I believe you had a question. Absolutely. So just to give you an example, when we had our Afghan neighbors that were coming in, oh my gosh, I was using volunteers 24/7. We had probably 1,500 volunteers at that point, because they were helping with transportation. They were helping with English lessons. They were helping taking people grocery shopping. They were helping, just bringing people here into their houses of worship to make them feel safe and to be welcoming. And so depending on what we have going on, people will contact us and say, hey, I'm a retired person. I'm sitting at home. I'm not doing much, and I would like to volunteer. And so if we have something going on where we can help them volunteer, like our gardening program, we've had so many people step up and say, hey, we want to teach kids how to garden, right? With the community gardening piece. If you're gardeners, please, we'd love to have you, put on your gloves, and we'll get you little knee pads or whatever we need, and we'll get you out there teaching the kids how to garden. Whatever your passion is. And if we can utilize that some way to help community members in need, that's what we do. We kind of connect our volunteers. That's why we've been able to be so successful over the past 4 or 5 years. Yes, sir. Yes. Sure. So, yes, the question was, what is the strength and support of the Muslim community in Tulsa? So, everybody thinks that they're a very minor number, but if we look at the numbers in Tulsa, we have probably about 45 to 46,000 Muslims in Tulsa, just in the Tulsa metro area, if we look at that area. So anywhere between Bixby, Broken Arrow, Jinx, and Tulsa, Waso, in that area, we have probably between 45 to 46,000. The majority of them don't look like me, so they're not identifiable, right? If you've gone into a hospital, majority of your specialists, we have over 600 doctors just right here within our community that are specialists. Some of them, they're the only specialists in the entire state. So we have a gentleman who is now the director of the pediatric oncology program at St. Francis. He is the only one certified in the entire state of Oklahoma to do transplant surgery on pediatrics. So we have a very large community of physicians, very large community of business owners. If you go to any of the IHOPs, the gentleman who owns all the IHOPs here in town, he's Palestinian. He used to be, back in the 90s, he used to be the dishwasher of the IHOPs here in town. And so now he owns all of the IHOPs here. He owns about 13 of them here, right? If you go to majority of these restaurants, if you go to Tiamo's, if you go to the Ridge, if you go to any of these places, the majority of them are owned by Muslims in the community. And so I know, they all look like everybody else. And so they kind of blend in, unless if they're identifiable like myself, right? Now, if they're identifiable like myself, then you know that they're a Muslim. But, you all rub elbows with Muslims all day, every day, and you have no clue that you're rubbing elbows with Muslims. Professors at universities and teachers in school and attorneys and so on and so forth. And so we've had dramatic amount of Muslims in the community, and we've had them since the 1800s. We've had Muslims here in Oklahoma since the 1800s, and nobody knows that, right? A lot of the slaves that were brought in were Muslim. We had indigenous folks. So just to give you an idea, Islamic Society of Tulsa is our mosque just up the street here, a couple miles up the street on 46th and Irvington, between 41st and Yale and Sheridan area, back by Tandy Y. We have 82 countries and 6 Native American tribes represented within our Muslim community. So if that sinks in, 82 countries and 6 Native American tribes that are represented within our Muslim community, just right there at our house of worship. And a good majority of the Muslims don't even go to that house of worship. On any Friday. Friday is our holy day. And so we have 2 services. Our first service is at 12:30, and they'll have somewhere between 700 to 1,000 people who come to the small service. And then our larger service is at 1:30. And they'll have somewhere between 2 to 2,500 people that show up to that service. And those are our weekly services. And that's not even the majority of the population, as I told you, when you're looking at 45,000. Home creations, the largest Glenwood Homes, the largest home builder in the state of Oklahoma is owned by a Muslim family, right? An Iranian Muslim family, right? And so those are just some of the contributions that the Muslim community has had here when we talk about Muslims in Oklahoma. Yes, ma'am. Majority of them don't. I'm the only one in my family who does. And so the hijab is a personal choice. I know the rhetoric that you hear is that it's forced upon us and all of these things. I was born and raised right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I did mixed martial arts for a good period of my life. I have a 2nd degree black belt in Taekwondo and a 2nd degree black belt in mixed martial arts. I fought in the cage. I modeled for Paul Mitchell and TG. I did all of these things. And there was no way in the world that you would have pegged me as a Muslim. And so I was going through some health concerns in 2004 when I delved deeper into my faith, and I decided that this is the choice I wanted to make. I can show you pictures of my daughters who I was showing Mr. Boswell and Mr. McDaniel earlier. There's no way that most of the time, everybody thinks that my children are Hispanic because they've got a little bit of a golden kiss to their skin. And so they'll start speaking Spanish to my kids, and my kids are like, oh, no hablo español, I'm sorry, And so, yeah, the majority of them don't look like me. So, yeah. Any other questions? I think we're at time, right? Yeah, 2 minutes. Thank you so very much again for having me here. I always love being at Harvard Avenue. And thank you for all that you all do.